right, so it's really just how to do this. Our agenda, I'm going to go from this to some hints that we've already learned. We can run through those real quick. And also using Catchafire, they have some really great resources online, chat boxes, things like that, that you can use if you're doing this in the middle of the day or early in the morning, something like that. And then I'm going to have some of our people who are really good at this answer some questions and tell us about their experience, and then give you a chance to ask me some questions, but also the funders. We have two funders on our call right now. We've got Beth Wolfuk, who's with the Scantlin Charitable Foundation and Documentation. She's wonderful. And also have Maria, who's been with me since this time last year when we first discovered this fun little tool that we got. And then we also have Alec, who is on our board, and Alec is in charge of Social Venture Partners evaluation and programming area, and he is learning everything. He's sort of new in that position. So, Alec, thanks for dialing in from Albuquerque, and glad to have you on the call. So, I'm going to turn it back on to stop the share because nobody likes looking at PowerPoint. That's no fun. I want to see everybody's faces and welcome everyone. Casey, thank you for coming. Scott McInich, he's been using this. Wonderful to see him and the great work that he does too. So some of the things I want to go ahead and kind of talk to you guys about are some of the things we've already learned about Catchafire. And the first thing that I hear everybody tell me, and I got it first from Amir, is don't go into the system and feel like you have to read the whole website. This Take it simple, take it one thing at a time, and it's overwhelming if you think you have to read everything. So don't worry about that. Just go into that let's get started area and look at the categories, and then you're going to get overwhelmed again. So what I'm going to say is start with a call. Think about who you might want to get some advice from, and make it a strategy or a coaching call. Those are lots of different categories in that, and just put out a description of a challenge you have in front of you. Maybe you're dealing with a difficult donor. Maybe you're trying to figure out how do I even begin to articulate what I need to do to measure, or I need a marketing person to tell me where I get started, or a website person. All of those things are easy 1 hour calls. It may be that you're stuck and we're coming out of COVID and you need somebody to just coach you through the emotions of getting your team back together or getting your board back together. All of that's on Catchafire, and you can do that. And I know several of you have used a few phone calls to try to get your kind of organized again. So I would start with a phone call. Start with some kind of strategy or coaching. The bell ringing, you here's my little dog. He always shows up in my Zoom meetings. And start with strategy or coaching. Start with something pretty easy that you can get in and get out of, something that only costs you an hour or an hour and a half. That's a very easy way to begin to know how to use the system. One, kind of figure out how you select volunteers and who you're going to get, and is this guy really as great as he sounds, or is that girl, I mean, come on, she runs Fidelity, like the Fidelity marketing department. Yeah, that's possible. You can get somebody like that. The next thing I'm going to tell you is something I have said over and over and over and over again, and probably all of you have heard me say this: delegate. Delegate this to a board member. Delegate this to somebody on your team. Kimberly, I know you've had this delegated to you. Delegate it to somebody that has a little bit of time to manage some projects, but also somebody who has stuff they need to get off their desk. So delegate this to a volunteer, to your roommate, somebody who can help you out with getting some things done. Casey, I think you and I may have had this conversation before. You may have somebody gave this to me to try to start working. So feel free to delegate this. In your sign-in system, you have a way to add anybody you want to. This is your decision. You don't have to have my permission or anybody's permission. Once you get in and you have that set up, this is your tool to use how you want. You pick your volunteers, you pick your projects, you pick your timelines. This is about helping you with your needs, not making me happy. And then finally, just use the Catchafire folks. Those people, they have all day, every business day, they've got people on the chat answering questions. They have people on an 800 line that have extensive nonprofit experience. Call them up, say, hey, I don't know what I'm doing, or I need help with, I know it's a big question, it's complicated. How do I get started, and how can I use Catchafire? Or what do you recommend? Because they also have experience in doing what you do every day, and it may be something that doesn't fit Catchafire, and they'll tell you that. So that's what I would say. Use their resources. And then I would come back to, again, delegate this. Find somebody else on your team. Once you figure out how to do it, maybe find somebody else on the team that might be able to use it. You'd be surprised what kind of creative things come out of this. We have one of the SVP nonprofits, which is Project Brave, one man shop, one woman shop, and she needed somebody to help her with moving their curriculum from just something that's used at schools to a book. He found on Catchafire. Let me get these two people in. There we go. Got two new people. Welcome. And I'm telling this story about Jill Cullinan, who's at Project Brave. She actually found a a designer who can illustrate the book that she's working on in the children's program that she has. So you never know what you're going to find. And some of my users who have been using this, who are on the call, are going to tell you a little bit about the volunteers they worked with, how they found good ones. Not all of them are great. That's true. But how to use the tool to be able to pick good volunteers and use it to maybe get some things off your desk and help you with your organization. So now, see how quick that was? I'm only 11 minutes into it, and want to go ahead and begin. I've got some questions for those of you who are already using it. I am going to open up with, since we all know Amir, I'm going to start with Sarah. So, Sarah, I know you have used, tell me about your experience so far with Catchafire.
Sure, happily. Hey, everybody. So we likewise are a very small organization. We have two full-time staff people. So very similarly heard about it and was like, oh my goodness, this could be capacity building for us. We're in. And I agree with everything that you're saying, Becky. I honestly kind of got in and looked around, got overwhelmed, put it away for a while, and then didn't come back to it until there was something very specific. And I think that's one of my areas of recommendation is use it for something that's already on your list and on your plate, because I feel like you can come to the platform and scroll and see all the things that are offered, and that gives you some ideas, but you may end up adding, kind of like, oh, well, we know we've needed to do X, Y, or Z. We kind of came about it from the end of ours was this major one we've done with Catchfire is a success metrics project, which we've had a very hard time defining our success metrics over the last couple of years. So, and it was an area I just knew I need an outside lens. I need outside expertise. This is not the way my brain naturally functions, and we don't have process in this regard. Yet it was beginning to be one of those areas that felt like all roads are leading to we need to figure this out. And so because it is still going to require a level of someone on your team's investment and time and management, and depending on how strategic of a project it is, it that might be upper level leadership, it might not be. And so those are two things I would say is like, they're depending on the type of project, it might not just be a project management role of the Catchafire volunteer, it might be strategy discussions. And so just making sure to find an overlap of the person who's managing it on your team and the level that they're operating on with the type of project, so that you're not running into that consultant trying to have conversations that could be highly valuable at a strategic level, but that's not who's managing the project, or vice versa. Like, this is pretty, like, we know the process, just make sure it falls in the right bucket, and making sure it's something that like already should be where organizational resources are directed for this moment in time, because you will still put organizational resources towards it. But yeah, that has been our, so I started this project back in March, and I actually just had my wrap up call with our volunteer 2 days ago. So it ended up being quite a long, and I know for some, if I heard that, I'd be like, oh gosh, like that is a really long time potentially. But that was right for us as an organization. We ended up diving into some really big picture strategy stuff that's now informing new layers of our curriculum development. And so we added on some scopes of work essentially. And what I appreciated, so to Becky's point, we were doing this impact metric project, and the guy we ended up working with is in Atlanta, and he's the chief evaluation officer for the CDC. And I read that and was like, I'm sorry, what? And just his level of expertise is unreal. And so he actually taught me a whole lot, even about how to view evaluation and metrics. And I was drawn to him obviously because of that layer of expertise, but I would also say being our first project, he was also an amazing fit because he's a very experienced Catchafire volunteer. And so he could teach me how to navigate even just the Catchafire system. And he also had his processes in place for the way to outline a scope of work that we both like agreed upon and was very clear. And then he would kind of say, okay, we can off-road here, or we can do this next set of scope of work. And he was able to really lead the process as far as determining or just outline to me the potential. And so I would say that as if you're embarking, especially on your first project or two, to find somebody, again, not just whose skill set is great in the area of expertise, but even in Catchafire. Because now I'm going down a road where have navigated something. I'm trying to navigate a project with a first time volunteer. And I can just tell it's just a little clunkier because they're also trying to figure out the process. So that's something I found highly valuable. I'll stop there at the risk of saying too much, but those are some really initial things that have been great. Tom ended up coming into 2 of our board meetings and even facilitating some time with our board virtually. And so it can get big and very capacity building, but again, it doesn't have to. And I think those are the things where finding the middle ground of an area that you really, again, for us, impact measurement was just like all roads were pointing there of like, we've got to figure this out. And so that we were ready to invest that level of time.
Oh, thank you. That's great experience, Sarah. And you'd kind of given me some of that, but I hadn't heard all of those things. So great to hear that turned out. Amir, give me a little bit about, I think you're still on top of our list of value. Tell me about your experience so far, how you got started, and maybe even what you know now that you wish you'd known when you started.
Sure. I think the bottom line up front is Catchafire has made my life easier and our organization stronger. But you got to know how to use it. And if you don't know how to use it, like any tool, if you don't necessarily know how to apply it, it might, like you get something for the kitchen and then it just sits in the cabinet and no one ever uses it. So it's like you gotta know how to use it. I would say one of the things I wish I knew when I started was, sort of just to prioritize and to scope things down, because my personality, I tend to just jump in and like, let me kind of play around in the field, and that's fine. But I think like, advice to others, from my learning from my experience is just kind of like what Sarah said, start with something small and finite and try that. But I think, to go a little further, yes, you can do some things that you can delegate, but it's also as an executive director and a founder, really important to kind of get out of your mental rut and get a different perspective. Getting somebody from, I've had people from Seattle who are like, wow, this is really different. This is really innovative. This is really cool. And also, New York and also California and also Atlanta, different places. And they'll give you different perspectives that you might not get in San Antonio. So just kind of a different viewpoint and some really good feedback. SOS had been around for 5 years with this website where we had Machu Picchu as our homepage background. And this guy out of DC, he's like, you're in San Antonio. I don't understand why you have Machu Picchu as your background. And it made sense to us because that was our first trip. And it's like, okay, this was kind of the very first, the launch. But it actually did not really make sense to people who were new to our organization. So we revamped our website. And just real quick, just to kind of run down, I've had help with websites. I've had help with one pagers, infographics, actually had a video made, and a lot of help with like executive coaching, elevator pitch type stuff. And those calls actually have been really helpful to get me to grow as a leader. So, I want to make sure to encourage y'all to try that when you have time. Basically, what I'm saying is focus a little bit of time on your own development too, as a leader or someone involved in your work.
Oh, that's great feedback, Amir. Thank you so much. Scott told me a great story. Scott McInich, you out there, you have a little bit of time. Tell us about your experience.
Yes, and apologize for no video. I've back from vacation and a bit of a health problem on the back end, so not looking really good these days. Yeah, so I've not used it as much as some of you all have, but I do have another project, and actually Amir mentioned it. I'm going to do a bit of search for executive coaching next. Which I've been meaning to do, but vacations and all that got in the way. But my first project actually was the phone call. And to me, that was, as Becky said, the easiest way to sort of dip your toe into it. And it wasn't a small project. It was actually an expansion plan for the nonprofit council that my team and I had been talking about for the past year. And even with the board prior to COVID, we're kind of on a track to start the process, and then it all came to a grinding halt. But last year, with this technology and platform, I was able to find a gentleman from Princeton Strategy Partners out of New Jersey who was unbelievable. And we were supposed to be booked an hour. We almost spent 2 hours on the phone, just because he was so fascinated with the council and our makeup and the work, and told him what our plan was to eventually encompass South Texas with satellite offices and programming that could be shared, and connecting executive directors from various markets in South Texas together, since it's been so successful here. And he actually helped us lay out kind of a game plan and a direction. And my marketing director and I have been working on that for the past 3 months. And hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have something to kind of present to funders and folks, stakeholders who might be interested in helping us do just that, connect more nonprofit leaders together in a network that is meaningful to them and help them grow their own organization. So I can't say enough just about if you've not done anything with the Catchafire and you're just like, I don't know, start with just one phone call with one project or one question, and you really kind of get fired up about it.
Thank you so much, Scott. And I hope you feel better soon.
Thank you.
That's got to be rough having to recover from vacation. My goodness.
Yeah, if only it was just recovering from vacation, but
yeah,
it was quite a trip.
Well, okay. I have another question for you. I think often we get a lot of questions about how do you pick the best volunteer? And so I wanted to get some advice from, Amir, you had mentioned that you have had some great ones and then some that you kind of were like, I don't know. So could you start off with saying, what are some of the things that you would look for? Sarah alluded to a little bit of when you're looking for a volunteer, how do you pick from these people? They're strangers from out of state sometimes.
Yeah, great question. So a couple of things I'd say about that. Number one, through the platform, you do have the ability to kind of see their reviews and see their past projects and kind of evaluations from other nonprofits who have used that volunteer before or have had a relationship with them in some way. Oftentimes their LinkedIn or other social media is posted as well. So I always look at the LinkedIn because I feel like professionally, I want to know kind of what's your background. Do you really have the expertise to help me? Or are you, is this just somebody who means well, but maybe isn't I may not learn as much from. And then the other thing I do is, so if I post a project and I get the platform will send you an email, someone is interested in your project, and you can just hire them on the spot or schedule a call. I always schedule a call just to make sure it's a good fit, and like, is their personality going to gel with mine? Do they understand my vision, what I'm trying to accomplish with the project? Do they seem trustworthy, reliable? And so, you have some opportunity to sort of vet them and interview them even for the, kind of try them on for the project. So that would be kind of my overall advice. I can go into more specifics if you have other questions about that.
Great, thanks. Kimberly's going to jump off. Hey, I hope you can use it soon, Kim, and best wishes to those at Partnership. For those of you who aren't members, it's a wonderful program. I wanted to thank you. I wanted to say first too, thanks to Maria for coming, and part of, we've had Maria and I talk once a month, and just about, what are you hearing and what am I hearing? And I wanted to ask you, Maria, some of the things that you've heard as feedback that is helpful. Would you share some of that? And especially from your lens as someone providing the service to the nonprofits. Tell me a little bit about your experience with Catchafire and what kind of advice you might give to the nonprofits.
Yeah, thank you, Becky. And so glad to see everyone on. I mean, I probably wouldn't add too much to what Scott and Sarah and Amir have said. I think, starting from the website can get really overwhelming, and sometimes I'll throw out kind of topics and samples to get for our partners to get a feel of what's on there. But I really like that approach, is to really think about, what is this thing that's kind of on your plate, that you, especially I think for the smaller organizations, and think about carving out that project. Or sometimes, there might be 3 big things and you're trying to prioritize, right? That's the thing. It's like, I think, Becky, in short, my answer to your question is like, I hear that as well. It's like, there's so many things, where do I even start? And so I think the idea too about if there's a discrete project that you have and jumping in with that, or starting with a call and saying, okay, I'm thinking about my, my organization capacity. These are kind of 3 buckets, and I'm trying to sort it. Like sometimes it maybe that on that call, you can get a sense of your sequencing, right? So if you have a communications piece and a fundraising piece, then, there may be something of what you might want to focus on first that might lead to something else. And I think even, I love Sarah's example too. You can start with something discrete and it might help you think about, oh, wow, there's this next piece and this next piece. So in some ways there's, what I like about the platform is like a stacked opportunity, right? You can start one place and then you see, oh, this is the other piece you want to build, and you want to build and you want to build. Sometimes when you're paying for a consultant, that happens as well. You think you know what you need, and then you need to build out more pieces. You need to build more pieces, and you're like, oh, well, our budget doesn't allow for that. And then you kind of have to, rethink it, or figure out if you can cut corners or try to do things in a way that you're going to have the budget and the resources to do it. So I think, there's a lot of learning this year. I really appreciate hearing from you what your experience has been locally. And I think hearing from like organizations in our San Antonio Bexar County community, it also, gives a different sense about what it's like to also work with folks outside of our community, and the value of that, as well as, all the great resources that exist within. So I would just, double tap on what you both are saying, and Scott, about really thinking of something concrete. And if you're kind of not sure where to start, a call is always great to kind of think through those ideas. And delegating as well. So especially, if you are the only the primary leader, or there's 2 or 3 of you, it might be in your head mainly. And so that call might be more appropriate. But also, if you're, a larger organization, and you know that you have members on your team that have specific communications projects, or you've been trying to think through your social media strategy, and they can kind of put in that time that's tied to their work, and really think through that piece, and they kind of, that's within their scope. If you can find 1 or 2 of your members of your team who could, also sign up and do it, that would be great. So we're constantly learning and want to hear back, kind of what's helpful to you, and how we can continue to support and improve this platform, because it's a great and huge resource. And I know there are a lot of folks eager to also join in and become members.
Thank you, Maria, and thank you for your ongoing, support of so many nonprofits through the tool. One of the benefits that we had at SVPSA, we're very small and don't have tons of resources, but it's people like Maria and Beth and people at MHM and Patricia at the Area Foundation that really made this possible. It wasn't SVP, it was you guys who put it all together and said, yeah, I'll try this with Becky. We'll stick our necks out in the middle of COVID. And so just a huge applause and thank you to those who took the risk with us, jumped in, and are learning on this learning journey with the funder side. I saw Kellen, and I remembered reading your Kellen's response about the headhunter and her leadership transition that they're working on. Kellen, I didn't know if you wanted to add anything to that as far as your experience. We'd love to hear from you if you've got a minute just to say how that worked out for you.
Sure. I spoke for it was a planned hour phone conversation, but it ended up being 2 with a headhunter. She's been in that area. She retired recently, but has been doing it for like 20 years in New York and had worked with a lot of, among other organizations. And she just really forced me to think realistically that there would be someone that we could use from Catchafire that would help us get it done. But because in the next year or so, that just wasn't that. She suggested that we look at a couple of local firms who will know the local landscape. It's obvious. She made me realize it's obvious that this is going to be someone local who needs to come into the Beal House because it is a small organization and it is a community organization, and it looks like San Antonio, that it needs to be someone who understands that. And then she also said, well, you can also look at this as a fundraising opportunity. And I went, what? And she said, yeah, your organization needs to celebrate me, I hate saying it that way, the leadership that is leaving, that's exiting, to celebrate that with a fundraising event. And she said that could turn around and pay for the search firm that you're going to hire now. And I went, oh, duh. So, the lights went off. And so I think that's what, I think those two things, that we needed to get someone local. She also made me realize that, and this was borne out by my conversation with one of the search firms we've interviewed, that we can't offer enough money to hire someone in the peak of their profession. It's going to be either an entry level or someone who's later in their career to run a Beal House, and I was obviously hoping for that, peak of their profession, but realistically, the money isn't there. And so it was a real eye awakening and realistic, brought me back down to earth. And I really did appreciate it. And she was loaded with enthusiasm for Beal House and what we do. So that helped too.
Oh, that's wonderful. Lots of us have lots of enthusiasm for what you do. Thank you, Kellen. I'll never forget when I got a tour of that. I was like 10 years ago, way back when I was at the chamber. But thank you for what you're doing. I think it's a wonderful program.
Thank you so much.
One of the things I want to be sure to encourage those of you who may have questions or things like that, you can, does anybody have anything specific they want to ask? Don't be shy. We don't have all the answers, but I hope that there may be somebody here who might be able to answer some questions if you have them. I don't know, Laura or Elia or Casey, is there anything that comes to mind, Dee Dee, that you're really thinking about, or if you're in the middle of deciding, does that bring a question to your mind?
Well, this was really good to hear because I got online too and just felt overwhelmed. And I'm glad to hear everybody else. I thought it was just because I was old and I was overwhelmed with the technology, but I really appreciate that. And I see the importance of narrowing it down to something, because I can think of so many things our nonprofit needs to grow and go and keep on. And so I really appreciated all of your input, and you too, Sarah, telling us, you just define that. Just get started. It's almost like just put your foot in the water, and don't be afraid to do that and see what happens. So thank you. This has been very helpful.
Yes.
And
I might add, one thing, and I haven't tried this out yet, but one reason I kind of looked and walked away right at first is I thought my project had to fall into the exact defined scope they had on there. So I first came looking for video editing help, and the only projects I saw on there were to create this like 3-minute explainer video. And I was like, well, that's not what I need. I need help editing an existing video series that we have in motion. So I was just like, well, this isn't the place for that. And then I talked with Becky a few weeks later, and she's like, no, you can, those are there as templates to start from, but you can edit those projects to best suit your scope of work. And honestly, I haven't gone back and done that if I don't know from a technology standpoint exactly how to do that. But that was very eye-opening to me of like, oh, we can craft that scope. Because to the point too of like vetting the right volunteers, I think a lot starts with what we put out there that we are looking for, and making sure to be best representative and put the time in there of our organization to make sure they'll bring an interested and strategic mindset, and that we outline, as far as we know it, the skill sets that are going to be most helpful, so that even the pool that comes to us right off the bat is potentially the best fit. So that was one I've kind of like learned the hard way and still not even come fully around to. But Dee Dee, to your point, like, because the other mindset I have is like, well, where would we have to spend money going out the door anyway? Like what, like we couldn't hire a video editor. And I was like, either this project has to be volunteer hours or we can't do it. We don't have that budget money. But I think sometimes it's like, oh, well, in addition to revenue coming in, how can we cut expenses going out? And this is an amazing way to do that, in terms of what were we already going to need to be paying somebody outside for? And let's come here first to see if we can not have to do that on a paid front.
Yeah, that's a great comment. I get asked a lot, well, there's just not a project for me out there. The 168 just don't fit me. And so I have told several people, you can customize what you need. I had a nonprofit call me and say, I need social media that does fundraising. And I thought, I'm surprised it's not out there, but there is fundraising and there is social media. So I said, look, adapt your social media content piece to make sure that it's only about fundraising, or fundraising about your gala, or you're looking for specific clients, that type of thing. So I do think that it's important. It's not real obvious when you get on it that you can customize it, a template, start with something that's close or that's in the category, and then make it what you really need it to be. So we got a report, we got our third quarter report back from Catchafire a couple weeks ago. And one of the neat things that they do with us is they show us the most common types of projects that people use Catchafire for. And they also kind of made some comments about how it was different last year, obviously, than it was the 10 years before. And the easiest things that people usually get started in are going to be marketing. And there are things like, I need a social media calendar, I need a website audit, I need somebody to write a fundraising letter for me. I just don't have time. I can do that. Of course I can do that. And I have great staff members, but we don't have time right now to do some things. So Sarah, to your point about, you already have things are in your task list. You know how to do these things, but it may be that it's number 9 and 10 and 11, and I just can't get to it yet. So those may be really good Catchafire projects. Have somebody help you write some employee job descriptions. Have somebody help you with that social media calendar for a specific program or for a specific event. Those kinds of things are wildly popular apparently in Catchafire. And so those are tools or things that can help you just ease the stress that I know that everybody's dealing with. We're opening up after COVID and there's a million things on everybody's desk. I kid around, Maria and I laugh about, we wish we could have access to Catchafire because I have about 12 things I want volunteers to help me with, but I can't do that. So I'm so glad that it's a tool. Are there other questions?
Becky, I had a question for the group, and it's about selecting, specifying, defining, refining a project. And it occurred to me as we were going along, there are various organizational self-assessment instruments around that you could use to, characterize your organization and look for areas that need improvement, and potentially there are even outside people such as SVP partners who could look at your organization with you and say, gee, you need to develop this component or that component. Do you think so? That's the background. Do you think that sort of self-assessment would be helpful in defining and refining a Catchafire project, or do you already know what you want to do? That's for everybody.
I mean, I can take a stab at it here. I would say that, yeah, it is helpful to kind of get that feedback, and it can change what you think you want. You think you want something, and you start pulling on one thread and you realize, oh my gosh, we've got all these other things we got to fix. Because again, when you're in it and it's your baby or it's your work and it's your day to day, it's what you see kind of, on a regular basis. Other people don't have that same perspective, and it helps you see your blind spots. So yeah, I think that's how it works. You do get that feedback to help kind of guide where your next projects are.
And this is Scott, and I would really just add, don't think, and I think Sarah might have mentioned this, it may grow bigger, but don't think you have to have this grand, one big project to start with. I mean, do a phone call, like pick sort of a topic that you're thinking about, even if it's a organizational assessment. Well, what really first do you want a consultant to look at? Is it staffing model? Is it a funding question? Or, so sort of zero it down, hone it down a little bit, jump into a discussion with someone. And I think from there, which is what happened to me, is, and I think Sarah mentioned this, it sort of grew into something a little bit bigger. And I have to say that Benjamin gave me his personal cell phone number to call him if I ran into any problems. And he also said, hey, follow up with me and send me your final report, or at least your draft, before you go to the board or anyone, and I'd be happy to craft and tweak it for you. So I think those kind of things, Alec, are what I would start with, because then you get sort of a relationship, and then from there it kind of grows, and just keep it simple first, and then I think you'll get in, and then you'll find, oh, this is easy, and now I can go on to the next thing.
Thank you.
And I just wanted to add, because Scott, you kind of got me thinking about something else I wanted to share. In terms of relationships, I've made friends out of this. I have new places to stay when I go other parts of the country now, which is great. And even donors and people who want to introduce me to donors in their communities, and want to get my mission and our organization sort of growing out into different places. And that's just our story. But I think the key, when Scott said relationships, I think you can really build some strong relationships out of this if you find the right connections.
Thanks, Amir. Thanks, Scott. And good question, Alec. We talk a lot about how we want to measure everything and do things in the right order. I was just reflecting back on some of the comments, and if I were somebody listening in who maybe was told to join this, not know that much about Catchafire. And this sounds like a Catchafire love fest. So I know that not every experience is perfect. There are times, just like any group of volunteers, there are times you have a volunteer that doesn't quite work out. And we were laughing about this on when we were talking with the other funders. And Catchafire, they get the feedback that sometimes it's a wonderful tool to have when you do have a bad volunteer, because they break up for you instead of having to have the awkward conversation or with someone. Or also, if I posted something, like Sarah, you said, I posted something and really kind of had to pull it back because I found out that's not really what I needed to do. There is no cost. Nobody tracks you on that. So I didn't know if anybody had anything else to add to that about, if there's a volunteer that's not working out, it is a pretty easy out. I don't know if any of you have had that experience. Amir?
Yes, I've had some that didn't work out. And when that happens, yeah, it is a very graceful exit. It's never been like a bad breakup situation. It's just like, hey, either a couple small projects, like I needed like infographics, and this person was like, yeah, no problem, and everything, did the interview, everything looked great, and this happens with volunteers, circumstances change, and then all of a sudden you don't hear from them for a while, and you try reaching out, and it's okay to just kind of cut bait at that point and say, yeah, this, something came up, maybe this isn't going to work. Another problem that I've run into sometimes is it starts as a call for volunteering, and then there's this sort of repositioning to proposition you for business. So like, yeah, I can help you with this, and if you want to go beyond that, I have this consulting fee, and I can help you on with this other side of things. And I kind of stay away from that, but at the same time, they're not supposed to be doing that on there. So you can leave that feedback for that volunteer, but Catchafire does not like them to do that.
Yeah, great point, Amir. One of the first things that scared me the most about it was, well, you could be full of a bunch of these consultants who give you some free zero advice and then try to charge you for it. Catchafire actually is very sensitive about that. And if you get reported for soliciting more business on the Catchafire platform, they will block you if you're a volunteer and you're a consultant. So that feedback loop is very important. That feedback loop is important to Catchafire. And so use that if you do have one of those experiences, because that was something we asked last summer was, yeah, I don't want to get a bunch of, Yahoo fundraiser consultants telling me things that, and then charging me for it. So just if your board asks you that is something that's built into the system. But it also is easy to let Catchafire know, and they take care of it for you. Other questions that anybody has? I know we're kind of coming up on our hour. We have about 10 minutes.